campaign as well. I'd now like to welcome George to the stage. He's been campaigning for a long time. He's been involved in Occupy and various other things, including ReclaimThePower. And without further ado, please.
It's always good to speak after other people because there's a lot of sort of ferment. A lot of things people say stimulate you to want to say other things, and to whether I'll cover the things that I planned on saying, I'm not really sure. But from what I've heard, I'm encouraged to be quite kind of broad brush and just to go with it and see what happens. What we're really talking about is a compassionate revolution. We have this massive propaganda system that spends roughly $3 trillion a year, so $3,000 billion worldwide a year on public relations, marketing, advertising, and the basic message of all of that is human beings are selfish. It's all about narrow self-interest, and that's essentially what we're stuck with, and anything else is pie in the sky. What we all know about ourselves and assume about virtually everybody we come across, knowing that it might not be the case, but is that people are basically decent. Sure, we all have, tendencies, we want like stuff for ourselves, and that's nice. And certainly, when things become more kind of insecure, then of course there's a tendency to be more self-regarding. If you've got kids and a family and things are getting more and more tough, the chances are you might back down actually and focus on that. But the basic reality, and I think Ruth touched on this, is that, and we understand this now, not from the poets over thousands of years and mystics and the rest of it, but from neurophysiologists, that we all at every moment want to be happy, connected, communal. We all have empathy neurons or mirror neurons, they're called. So we all experience the suffering of both ourselves and others in a very similar way. Watching somebody else suffering is not very dissimilar in terms of the internal experience to suffering oneself. And this is the great underlying truth that $3,000 billion is spent every year to keep us away from. And I think that the kind of link here is that there is a kind of giant, unimaginably huge win-win that waits for us if we can tackle the problems that we have at the moment. And I think Naomi Klein is one of the most inspiring voices for me on this. In facing up to this sort of incredible lose-lose trajectory that we're on at the moment, we can open our eyes to that amazing future that is available. And it's available also because of technology that has matured hugely in the last 50 years, both in terms of our capacity to communicate with each other, in terms of renewable energy, etc. The figures for 2011, I think, globally, were that fossil fuels were subsidised 6 to 1, 5 to 1 2011 over renewables. That's subsidies for the most mature profitable industry in history. And then it went up in 2012 to 6 to 1. I don't know what the figures were for 2013. But the point is, we're throwing huge amounts of money at these industries. And the reason for it is totally simple. It makes no sense in terms of basic economic rationale, but in terms of how politics actually works, if you've got trillions of dollars of power and money, you invest a decent chunk of that to make sure that the political system goes your way. And the reason you do that is that really obviously the only price trajectory for renewables is down. As the scale increases, as the technology improves, it's going to get cheaper and cheaper. And if we have a genuinely democratized energy system, we can only imagine the technologies that have been bought up by the powerful fossil fuel companies, and that's not, again, that's not conspiracy, that's just basic economics. There are probably thousands of things that we could be doing already that we're not doing because these technologies have been either bought or kind of bullied out of the way. So there is this amazing future waiting for us, and the compassionate revolution is the feminist revolution. It's about recognizing that underlying that kind of capacity to compete that we all have when things are sort of fear-based is that desire to share and have a much better, more communal world. But divide and rule, as Ruth said, has been working for hundreds of years. The Putney debate that took place in 1649, which is just before Charles II was deposed, the new model army was mapping, and then the people, the level of everyone got screwed with the people of property that took over for the new system. But one of the main elements of that discussion was how do we beat divide and rule in our new system. So this was 500 years ago. And one of the main ways that I think is relevant to us in this room that divide and rule works at the moment is, and again drawing on Naomi Klein, that the reality of disaster capitalism is that there are so many things that are wrong. There's been such an avalanche of things that we have to try and defend against, that for really practical reasons, in trying to struggle against each of those kind of fronts of attack, we end up in divided separate groups just trying to prevent things getting far, far worse. So I think the enormous challenge that we have to try and meet is how to build a unified movement, and that's given this $3,000 billion of propaganda and the ownership of media. And I think where Occupy was an inspiring start, and it wasn't the answer, but where it was an inspiring start was that it was simultaneous in 1,100 cities across the world. It was faced at the financial system which is driving this stuff. And as Linda pointed out, you know, the $40 trillion in the fossil fuel industry is very big, and we tend to think of the fossil fuel companies specifically, but the banks that sit atop them are even more powerful. There's a great quote that many people will have heard, but I think it's worth repeating as often as possible from Henry Ford, which is something like, "It's good that the ordinary person doesn't understand the banking system, for surely if he did, sexist times he or she, for surely if he did, there would be revolution by tomorrow morning." We essentially have a situation where the banks get to invent money for what they want, which is fossil fuels, which is, you know, blowing up mortgage bubbles, etc. So what we essentially need to do is democratize the economy. The term political economy was kind of current 100 years ago, and I think one of the greatest feats of the propaganda system, and this is accelerated in the neoliberal period, is selling the idea that you can separate economics and politics. Economics is this kind of science that is about some calculations and markets and all the rest of it, and politics is sort of somewhere else. And, you know, for really obvious reasons, if we don't have control over economic decisions, we don't have control over political decisions. So this is really about a movement that needs to come together, that needs to have the faith to spread the word about a better world, and in practical terms, in terms of what this conference is about, how we kind of diversify the movement, how we build something like a critical mass, to be able to understand how climate change is but the most sort of urgent symptom of this crazy undemocratic politics we have. The benefit of understanding it in terms of that wider context is that we can speak to people who are worried about the cuts, who are worried about more specific things that are affecting their lives. And again, as Ruth's, you know, real life experience has shown, that can really, people's understanding can really shift overnight. And perhaps the last thing to say is that critical masses for change, like the academic literature suggests they're between 1% and 7% of people usually. You know, so how is it that 1% of people can trigger rights of women, decent working conditions, end of slavery, etc.? And the answer is precisely as Ruth was saying, because people are already living this totally sort of cognitively dissonant existence. They want the better world that we should have already. They believe that, of course, you shouldn't have tiny percentage of people taking all the world's resources and then using that power to destroy the politics for everyone else. Everybody believes in this stuff already deep down. Our job as activists is to inspire people to come into spaces where they can actually just connect with that basic compassionate knowledge that we have beneath our kind of fearful denial mechanisms. I was meant to be here sort of specifically with the ReclaimThePower and Occupy happened, I haven't really done that. So these comes ReclaimThePower, basically it's the evolution of climate camp. I was at the Balkan reception camp where kind of left my lovely pregnant son over there. Who's due to give birth in 2 days, so it's kind of amazing that she's here today. But yeah, that weekend of ReclaimThePower, when it came to the Balkan camp, that really it brought thousands of people along and really kind of forced what was already quite a high-profile issue because of the camp into being a much more high-profile issue. And the challenge this summer, because it's not fracking isn't new like it was last summer, is to make sure that the extreme energy site that we picked this year involves coming together of people that have just as much influence. In terms of having my Occupy hat on, there are really interesting discussions afoot at the moment about what we do in October for the roughly 3rd anniversary of Occupy, which is October the 15th. There's a big TUC gathering on the 18th, which is a Saturday, and what we've decided specifically so far is we're going to have some kind of occupation of Parliament Square from Friday the 17th to probably Tuesday the 22nd. And the idea there is for this not to be sort of Occupy as was, but Occupy specifically getting numerous different groups to descend on Parliament with their own message about the individual, the sort of specific issues that they're focusing on, but trying to get all those groups to sign up to a a basic statement that says we recognise that these fights are not separate. My personal sort of baby, if you like, in terms of how we try and move forward. And this is just to seed the idea, and if it's interesting to people, please come to the workshop later about how we build a critical mass. But to do something like a process pyramid, where we get people to take action on days of action going forward from the camp for say 3 months, and the goal is to get everyone who takes part in that movement to take some action each week, that the bar for involvement is as low as possible, so it could just be handing out leaflets, but your job is to take a picture and send it to the website and get one other person to take some action with you the following week. So it's a real kind of grassroots, one by one shift. Thank you very much.
Thank you.